This is Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby, and you're listening to the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. Relying too much on external validation can keep you from enjoying your life. Today, you'll learn how to validate yourself so you can stop worrying about what other people think, start feeling more confident, and start living a life that's true to you. We're listening to one of my favorite bands of all time. This is L.A. Witch. The song is Starred from their album Play with Fire. And I chose this one for us today because it has just such a nice little reminder that you are actually a shining star already. And being able to get connected with that truth is so important in feeling good about yourself, your life, being less reliant on others for external validation. When you feel confident in your own worth, your own abilities, your own competence, feeling okay about yourself, no matter what other people may think of you. And there are so many important benefits that come from learning how to do this. You will actually have stronger and much less volatile relationships with other people when you are more clear and confident and less attached to what others think of you. Interestingly, you actually have more opportunities to learn and grow from your interactions with others when you feel more stable on the inside. And also, you will feel much more even-keeled just day to day when you're able to regulate yourself rather than needing somebody else to do that for you. So we are talking about so much big, important stuff today, and I'm really, really glad that you're here to join me. As we talk today, I'm going to be mentioning a variety of other podcasts, articles, resources, and of course, we will link to all of them on the post for this podcast, which you can find at growingself.com. And if you would like to access the other resources that I'm mentioning to you, you can find all of them. They're totally free at growingself.com. Just go to the blog and podcast page. You'll see it right at the top there. Navigate to the happiness collection or the love collection. And from there, you'll find a number of content collections on personal growth, self-esteem, self-confidence. And in those, you'll find assortments of articles. I've created little Spotify playlists with different podcast content collections for you so that they'll be easy for you to find. But that is how to find all of them. And then also, hey, thank you so much if you're one of the many who's reached out to me lately with some questions about how to feel more confident, how to feel better about myself. And I just want you to know that I'm making this episode in response to those questions because becoming less dependent on external validation truly is the key. This is a skill that once you master it, you're going to feel better about yourself. You will have more stable relationships, and you'll feel more confident just day to day. So this is for you. And if you have a question for me, get in touch. You can send an email to hello@growingself.com. Obviously, Instagram, Facebook, usual suspects. I'm around. Okay, so let's dive right into our topic today and talk about external validation. And I'm so excited for today's episode because truly, so many different things are attached to this concept. And, as a psychologist, marriage counselor, coach, I'm always talking to people who fundamentally are coming in wanting they say, I want to feel happier. I want to feel more satisfied with my life. I want to have better relationships with other people. But, at the end of the day, I really want to feel better about myself. And learning what you're doing kind of with other people to manage your anxiety, regulate yourself, determine your self-worth. If there's one thing that you can do differently without really having to change anything else, it is when you learn how to stop worrying so much about what other people think and I would also like to say that learning how to do that is not flipping a switch. You don't just decide to stop worrying about what other people think. Because sometimes when I think people talk about this, they make it sound so easy, don't they? They say, stop worrying about what other people think. You're like, oh, okay. But like how to do that is actually quite complex. There are a lot of moving parts to this. And it is actually, for most people, very deep growth work. So we are not talking about any of this flippantly. And also, just to manage your expectations, listening to a podcast on this subject is not going to be the end of this. What I'm going to be offering you today is kind of a guide, like here's how this works. But just know that doing this work is truly a journey. For most people, it takes months. I have personally had clients who've been working very actively on managing this and learning how to do this over years, kind of, just depending on where they're starting from in their ability to do this. So I just wanted to say that because the last thing that you need is any kind of messaging that makes you feel like it should be easy, because it's not. It requires work, and it is also entirely achievable. And today you'll learn about the things, kind of the stages along the way, and the things that you can be doing to help yourself grow in this very important area. And when we think about the core of this experience, and that I think what all of us want, is really just to feel more confident in ourselves. Right? When we stop worrying so much about what other people think, what that means by converse is that we're more self-directed. We are more self-guided. We are able to decide for ourselves what is important, what is valuable, and I think really be more autonomous and guided by our own values. And, a lot of people, again, really struggle to do that. And many people will spend a lot of time and energy trying to, air quote, make other people like them, which is especially hard when they're chasing after getting the approval of people who are maybe difficult to please. And I know that so many people struggle to feel good about themselves and their choices if there are dissenting voices coming from outside themselves. Like if you have an opinion, feel that something is important, have a certain set of beliefs, or even just want something, and it feels like there's argument around that, or other people disagree with you or think that's a bad idea. Many people struggle to kind of maintain their own inner North Star in the face of that. Like if other people feel differently, it's like, well, that must be a bad idea, and kind of collapse. And the danger of this is that they become increasingly disconnected from themselves in the process, and often increasingly resentful of others, but without really knowing why. It's blaming others for being obstructionist or difficult, but not really realizing that it's their own ability to be confident and kind of stable in their own ideas, whether or not other people agree with them. When that is true, other people can disagree with you all the time, and it doesn't actually matter that much because they can have their opinions and you can still have clarity about who you are and what is important to you. Oh, there's so much here. And also, can we just say it's totally natural to care about what other people think, and positive in some ways too. I mean, we also don't want to go too far to the other side of this, which is being closed off to the needs, rights, feelings, and perspectives of other humans, because that's not good for anybody either, particularly if you're in a healthy relationship with people that you care about and that are emotionally safe. They may have important feedback for you that is relevant and important for you to be taking in and hearing, about maybe how you come across to others, how you are showing up in relationships. And it's also important to be able to let that in a productive and helpful way so that you have growth experiences along the way that are of benefit for you as well as others. So I just wanted to say that too. We don't want to become so walled off and certain in our own supremacy that we stop, taking in information that helps us grow too. And again, normal to care about what other people think, and nothing inherently wrong with wanting external validation or enjoying, people being happy with you or approving of you. And in fact, I think you do need at least some validation from the people around you to feel connected to them. I mean, we are all social creatures, and part of the fabric of relationships is experiencing mutual appreciation, feeling approved of and valued by other people. And it's really, I think, fundamental in some ways to our wellness to be in relationships with people who value us and who show us that they value us in large ways and small. But this becomes a problem, like the need for approval, need for validation from others becomes a problem when you don't know how to validate yourself. You either don't know how or are not able to look internally to connect with who you are, what you think, how you feel, what you want, what is good for you, not good for you. You're disconnected from that, or you don't trust that, and you're not able to allow it to guide you. You don't have the kind of relationship with yourself that allows you to affirm your own thoughts, feelings, needs, wants, and kind of have that acceptance and approval inside of yourself. And when that is true, when you don't know how to do that, you become reliant on whatever validation or approval you can get from the people around you. Like when you can't do it yourself, you need other people to do it for you. And that puts you in a very precarious spot in so many different ways. I mean, emotionally, but also relationally. That is not good for relationships when that happens. So today, we're going to be talking all about how you can stop worrying so much and really become much more able to validate yourself, stay connected with yourself, have your relationship with yourself be your primary relationship, and it'll really provide so much peace and comfort. You'll stop worrying about what is going on in other people's heads, start valuing your own wisdom and judgment, and it leads to so many positive growth opportunities. And so we're going to be talking about why you care what other people think and what external validation is, and also some signs that you may be relying too heavily on external validation or confirmation or approval in a way that is not healthy for you or your relationships. And then we're going to be talking about a bunch of different just action strategies and tips to be able to develop these skills inside of yourself. And again, I'm going to be talking about a lot. We're going to be going through it fast, and just know that every single one of these ideas could be a very deep, deep dive. So even though I'm going to be going through them quickly, I don't want you to feel like these are minimal, high level, like take this advice and everything will be different. It's like each of these things requires work in order to fully understand, in order to actualize in your life. So with that in mind, so part of the reason, again, why it's normal for all of us to care about what other people think, at least to a degree, is because it is baked into the bread. Humans are social creatures. We talk about the biological basis of love, attachment, connection, relationships a lot on this podcast. And the truth is that our evolutionary history, our survival drives are organized around our ability to form and maintain loyal relationships with other people. It's really so recently that human beings, created societies that allowed us to be sort of safe and healthy on a physical level, like, have enough food to eat, be protected from wild animals, or not freeze to death independently. Prior to that, our literal survival depended on being part of a community that was working together, part of a tribe, part of a collective. Like, this is what we are designed to do. And so because of that, we have hardwired systems in our brains and our bodies that seek connection, seek stable connection, are highly averse to any kind of social rejection, because that meant death for our ancestors. Like 10,000 years ago, if you get kicked out of the tribe, like, good luck with that, right? And so we have many internal systems inside of us that are designed to maintain connections with others, look for approval from others, be reading the emotions of other people and kind of gauging those, especially around faces. We have highly developed systems inside of us that take information that we are not consciously aware of, but that are coming from other people around how they feel, and particularly how they feel about us. Like, it's just so fundamentally important. And it's also true that part of this system is that negative assessments from others create feelings of shame and feelings of guilt. Because if you go back 20,000 years ago, if somebody doesn't think well of you and is thinking, should we vote this person off the island, send them off in their little own canoe and never come back? Shame of, I'm the worst person in the world, I'm so sorry, please forgive me. Or guilt of, I can't believe that. That was so terrible of me. I'm so sorry. Like, either of those emotional responses to rejection equaled this appeasing behavior. If you think about like dogs in packs, there's the alpha dog and then a lower status dog. What will they do if they feel threatened? Roll over on their back. Let me show you my belly. Please forgive me. Don't kick me out of the wolf pack. Like that kind of thing. Humans do that too, but we're not conscious of it. This is going back into like, midbrain, limbic brain kind of stuff. And it's not bad or wrong if it happens, but it is just so instinctive and reactionary and connected to very old things. And the problem is that this isn't like related to thinking behaviors. This isn't a rational, conscious thought many times. And when people don't understand these kind of, emotional currents that exist in us for very good reasons, we can unknowingly and totally understandably begin organizing ourselves and our lives around maintaining that connection, but it's sort of driven by those dark emotions, guilt, shame, fear of rejection, and really like looking to others only for how we are defining ourselves. Are we safe? Can we trust ourselves? Are we worth something? And that creates problems, as you may already be considering in your own life, right? Particularly when we put it into the context of our modern lives, because we'll still instinctively feel feelings of shame, feelings of guilt, and wanting to, not just avoid those, but like those are repair signals. Oh, I'm so awful. I need to fix this with this person because it sort of motivates a desire for appeasing behavior. And when we experience a lot of that, we can become just highly vigilant, I think, about what other people might be thinking. And we begin trying to then, therefore, change the way we feel on the inside. I don't want to feel shame. I don't want to feel guilty. I don't want to feel anxious. I don't want to feel bad about myself. So to do that, I'm going to try to change and influence this other person to think well of me and show me that by changing my own behavior. And it's like really trying to get this need met from somebody else. And like when you think about it that way, I mean, it's very understandable to me why we all do that. But again, the opportunity here is just to really become much more self-aware around the fact that it's happening, because it's so reactive. Like most of the time, people literally don't even know that that's what they're doing. Because again, there are parts of your brain, large parts, powerful parts. Actually, most of your brain is operating on this very non-conscious level. It does not speak to you in words. It isn't coherent thoughts. It communicates to you in feelings or in impulses. It's, what people talk about with intuition. Like that's where we're running. And it's not woo-woo like new age stuff. I mean, that's actually how most of your brain is working, and very well, actually. But it's understanding how this works. It gives you a lot of ability to begin to have a different relationship with it, right? Because when we are able to realize what's going on and where these feelings are coming from, and start to notice how we begin organizing ourselves in such a way to try and get approval from other people as a way of managing our own feelings, it's like just like that naked lunch moment. And William S. Burroughs, when you just recognize like the disgusting thing that's actually impaled on your fork, or if you flip on the lights, there's this, oh, I'm doing this kind of moment. And then it becomes a totally different conversation. It becomes, what do I want or feel like I need from other people right now in order to manage these feelings of shame, anxiety, and guilt that, I really don't need to be feeling? How can I do that for myself? Because then you're able to become much more emotionally stable. But it requires self-awareness, and it also requires energy. And again, though, once you can do this, it creates a stable foundation, because you're deciding what your values are. You're deciding how you measure up. You're able to regulate your own emotions no matter what other people do. And then the way other people feel about you, either fundamentally or fleetingly, it doesn't shake the foundations of how you feel about yourself. Because that's what happens when you can't do this. If somebody disapproves of you or doesn't give you the validation that you feel like you need in order to be okay on the inside, it creates this extreme emotional reaction inside of you that will, unfortunately, but fairly predictably, actually harm your relationships with others. So when we think about the experience of being validated externally, it's when we're around people who are reflecting back to us that our thoughts and our feelings make sense, we matter, they agree with us, they approve of us, and also, that they affirm our decisions or our ways of thinking. And of course, this is so difficult because there is literally not a correct way of doing pretty much everything. There are, extreme tails of the bell curve at which human behavior is patently problematic and will create problems. But there's a lot of average in the middle that can look like many, many different things. And this can, political orientations, parenting styles, spiritual belief systems, ways of approaching work, life, relationships, what you do for fun. I mean, all kinds of different things. There's a lot of different ways to be that are fantastic and just fine. But to be able to have developed that sense of who you are, what you value, what you want to be, what you think is important, what you think is true, is requires a lot of work, but also B, without that fundamentally being stable inside of yourself, you're going to feel very uncomfortable interacting with people who don't value the things you do, see the world the way that you do. And it puts you in this little echo chamber where you are right and you are surrounding yourself with other people who are similarly correct. And then everybody else is, you're kind of suspicious of. And that's really stunting in a lot of ways. It limits appreciation and tolerance for other ways of being. It limits diversity of thought. And also, particularly in relationships, it can create a lot of hostility and a lot of barriers. But most importantly, it can create feelings of massive anxiety, shame, guilt. If you have a truth, maybe emerging belief or want something different that maybe is not shared by people who are close to you. If you can't validate yourself, it becomes very, very difficult to be yourself, empower yourself, assert yourself in healthy ways, have healthy boundaries with others, when they may just have different opinions of you. And I think in the worst places, it's external validation is needing other people to actively be interacting with you in such a way that it regulates you emotionally. So like if you are upset, not feeling good about something, and you are depending on someone else to talk with you in such a way or behave towards you in such a way that is soothing to you, that helps you become more regulated and kind of calm down, because you can't do that for yourself. And like the rest of us, you are in a relationship with a fallible human who isn't perfect and doesn't always know exactly what to say, or isn't perfectly empathetic and sensitive, and may struggle themselves with trying to figure out how to have healthy emotionally intimacy. And so in any relationship with any other human, you can expect that they are not always going to be just right. They're not always going to know what to do. They're not always going to say the right thing. And though the problem is that when you are highly dependent on other people to be meeting your own emotional regulation needs through the way they behave towards you or through the way they treat you, when they don't do that perfectly, or also, fairly, when that it's not fair to them to have that expectation, because as soon as you need somebody to be a certain way in order to make you feel a certain way, that also starts to send the message of it's not okay for you, fellow human, to have your separate thoughts, feelings, behaviors, needs, wants, dreams, values, because if you do any of those things, I fall apart on the inside. And so it can turn into a lot of controlling behaviors, quite frankly, of other people that are not healthy for either of you. But the other thing too is that when your person/people don't show up for you in perfect ways, you will not just kind of fall apart. You'll often feel angry towards them, that they are harming you, they're being mean to you, they are narcissists, they are not, meeting your needs, whatever. And, while there certainly does need to be a middle ground, and people should be striving to have thoughtful and emotionally intimate, emotionally safe relationships with each other, that is not possible when you're depending on somebody else to be a certain way with you in order to help you feel okay about yourself because you can't do it on your own. That turns into a one-sided relationship that is actually kind of all about you, even if you're not fully conscious that that's what's happening. So this can really create a lot of different problems relationally and turn into this, the technical term for it is emotional enmeshment. You need your partner to be a certain way in order to feel okay on your own. And this can be, lead to codependent behaviors. It can lead to a lot of emotional reactivity in relationships, and actually a lot of controlling and anxious behaviors as well. And what it will also do is lead to avoidant behaviors in their partner if they're feeling controlled or attacked by you for not being perfectly perfect all the time. They'll start to kind of move away from you in self-protective ways because they feel like they can never be who or what you need. Most commonly, we see this in primary relationships, like between you and a partner. That's when it becomes, I think, the most intense and the most obvious, if it's when you need something from your partner that you're not able to give to yourself. So that's what it is. And again, the reason for correcting this is that nobody is perfectly dependable ever when it comes to this kind of thing. And if you can't do it yourself, you're gonna feel bad and you're gonna struggle in relationships. So signs that you may be relying too heavily on external validation. If you have a lot of trouble making decisions on your own, if you're like, polling a lot of people to find out what they think before you decide what it is that you should think, that would be an indication that this is a vulnerability for you. Also, if you really fear judgment, if it is difficult for you to put yourself out there and kind of imagining disapproval, hostility, anger, rejection from others for like doing the air quote wrong thing, that can be hard. Another way this shows up is if you have a lot of trouble setting boundaries with other people, that you are essentially compromising your own values, your own needs, your own rights in order to gain the approval or acceptance or validation from other people. That can be unhealthy. Perfectionism is another byproduct of relying heavily on external validation, this inner pressure that you have to do things over the top well, that there's like a performative thing. It's not okay to make mistakes. It's not okay to be anything less than A+++, which is exhausting and also impossible and also paralyzing and will make you less effective at the end of the day because you have to just get comfortable with being good enough. But if you have a lot of anxiety about judgment, rejection, what other people will think, or have impossibly high standards for yourself, that's hard to do. That's hard to do. People pleasing can be another indication that you are fueled by external validation. Also, I think just not being confident in what you think unless others agree with you. And the converse of that is trying really hard to get other people to agree with you. So this could be arguing with other people so that they come to see and agree with your perspective. It could also be working really hard to prove your worth to people who are rejecting or critical. So it's like almost chasing after other people to try to get them to change their minds and either agree with you, do what you want them to do, express certain feelings or approval for you. It can look like a lot of things in relationships, but when people rely a lot on external validation, it often feels on the inside like needing to fight for their rights. So if that's happening in your relationship, that is just something to be aware of. Also, certainly true. I mean, not taking criticism well, like getting super defensive. Again, going back into that arguing with yourself, like, no, I need you to agree with me that you're actually the problem, not me. Because if it is me, I would be devastated and I don't know how to deal with that. So, getting defensive, or conversely, like collapsing into a big heap of shame, a puddle of, oh my gosh, I'm the worst person in the history of the world because this person criticized me, without being able to take a more balanced approach. And sometimes both at the same time, getting super defensive and argumentative and then collapsing into a depression because somebody, gave you feedback about something that maybe is a growth area for you. But neither of those approaches are actually helpful or constructive, either to your relationships or to your growth. Also being very heavily swayed by praise. Like if people tell you that you are doing a good job or say nice things about you or tell you that you're the best person ever, like if you're really dependent on external validation, you could start following them around like a little puppy. And the problem with that too is that narcissists or other people who can be exploitative or manipulative of other humans often begin relationships with that kind of love bombing. Let me tell you why you're so awesome and all the potential and amazing things that I see in you, because that's part of that hook. And so you will actually be more vulnerable to getting involved in relationships with people who maybe aren't that healthy themselves if you're kind of a praise junkie. Or on the other side, you can begin doing things for the sole purpose of getting praise from other people that are not really connected to your own value system. I think there's the stereotype of social media kind of culture that can be quite damaging. Again, I think to especially young teenagers or adolescents whose brains are still building, what can I be posting online about my appearance or my lifestyle or what I'm doing or what my thoughts that are going to get me likes, that are going to be validated by my audience, so what is being posted, what is being done, what is being pursued starts being totally disconnected from who they are, how they feel, what they really believe in, these healthy, strong parts of themselves. There's a real disconnect around just a very performative way of being that's not really healthy for them. And then certainly a sign that external validation is a vulnerability for you is when you're really concerned with status, symbols, appearance, right? If you can't go to the grocery store without makeup on because you might run into somebody, or maybe going into debt to have certain things that convey status to others can be damaging. And I think most tragically and heartbreakingly, when people try to change their physical appearance, either by manipulating their body shape or size through malnourishment or mistreatment of their physical needs. I mean, in extreme examples, it can turn into body dysphoria and plastic surgeries and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, just as you're trying to get a map of what does this really look like in practice, I hope that this little list that we ran through helps you just gain awareness of what it looks like kind of in the wild so that you can see it in yourself and maybe in others too. And so when it comes to some tips, right, some strategies, some things to be developing in yourself that will allow you to stop caring what other people think, release that need for external validation through developing a stronger and healthier relationship with yourself that is organized around your, not just awareness, but confidence and ability to legitimize your own needs. Some of the things that you can begin putting into practice that, again, require practice, require effort, require intention, require often deep work are some of these. And one, a cognitive strategy, you can write this on a Post-it note, stick it to your bathroom mirror, is that nobody cares about you or me or any of us. Everybody is self-focused, right? Everybody is primarily concerned with what is going on inside of them and in their lives. And when you think about how focused you are on what somebody else is doing or not doing, that's just not part of your life, probably. It doesn't occupy a lot of your time unless you're thinking about what they think about you most of the time, or unless this is somebody that you're partnered with and is behaving in a way that is creating bad feelings inside of you. That is when we can get kind of hyper-focused and fixated on other people. But generally speaking, really, nobody cares about us. Other people just don't think about you that much. They don't think about me that much. And getting comfortable with that idea and learning to appreciate that idea, I think can be very, very valuable, because without it, there can be this hypersensitivity as you're walking through the world that other people are very interested in. What you're wearing, whether or not you're wearing mascara, how much you weigh, what you do for a living, And so another thing that is, I think, the most fundamentally important part of this work, and this is the part I think that does take the most time and energy, is to get really clear about your own value standards. And then learn how to measure yourself by your own value standards and your self-determined ideas about what is important and what isn't. And again, this is a very major process of self-awareness that goes into who am I? What do I believe in? What feels like the most valuable and important things in the world to me, right? Like what matters in my life? What kind of person do I really want to be? Is it a good friend? Is it being of service to the world in some way? Is it making a difference in the lives of others? Is it producing creative work that touches other people? I mean, spend a lot of time here, because once you get really clear about that, then you have the opportunity to compare other things to whether or not that matters in terms of your core truths. And it creates that basic foundation in yourself, because when you have that, then you can have realistic conversations with yourself around, am I living in the way that I want to live? How am I showing up at work? How am I showing up in my relationships? Am I spending my time in a way that I value? Who am I spending time with, right? Because it allows you to make almost informed decisions about whether or not things matter to you. And again, when you're clear about this, you're determining for yourself what is important. And when you have that ability, what other people think or don't think or react or respond to become much less significant, because there's this self-awareness that they don't get to decide who you are or what should be important to you. They are also operating by their own internal belief systems, their own value systems about what is important to them, what they value, what they are organizing their lives around. And so it's you also begin to see, as you yourself become more autonomous and clear about who you are, I think there's also a greater respect and appreciation and tolerance for other humans who are different from you, and being able to allow that, so that when somebody else may disagree or have a different opinion, as opposed to this catastrophic collapsing into self-doubt and self-recrimination, it becomes I could see that. They came from a very different background and they have had different life experiences, and they have things that feel true for them that don't feel true for me. When I look on their side of the table, I can see how that makes sense, and I don't need them to be different, but I also don't need to judge myself according to their standards, because I have my own. Another fantastic strategy to buffer yourself from what other people are thinking is to have clear goals. I mean, part of it comes from knowing who you are, but then next is what do you want in life? How are you going to create that? How will you know if you have been successful by the standards of your own yardstick or not? Because the clearer you are about that, and the more intentionally you are designing your day-to-day life activities and ways of being around that, the less you will need or crave external validation. Additionally, and this sort of sounds counterintuitive in some ways, but release the temptation or break the pattern of having judgment for others. Because when you are judging other people, it ultimately hurts you. If a part of you feels puffed up by your, thinking badly of somebody else, but on a deeper level, you're sort of reinforcing this message that the judgments of other people may be valid and that other people are judging you. That's partially where it comes from. So people who tend to fear judgment of others the most tend to be highly judgmental themselves. And it's this very weird and subtle aspect of being reliant on external validation, that if you are looking out into the world and measuring your own worth against other people, and if other people are lower on whatever imaginary unit of measurement you have in your mind, then you feel better about yourself. And again, you're using other people to feel better about yourself, but they're like not telling you you're great. You're like, oh, I'm better than that. And so when we're carrying a lot of judgments for other people in our minds, it is a way of regulating our own emotions, but it is also contributing to this belief that everybody is walking around with a lot of judgment for other people, which makes you feel hypersensitive and not safe in the world. So the quicker you can get out of the habit of not judging other people, the safer that you will feel in the world. And, you will also then need to decide for yourself what's important and what's worthy. And ways of doing this are to be consciously and deliberately developing appreciation for others, noticing the strengths and the values and the value of other people, even if they are different from yours. And also, I think, having a lot of compassion and empathy for the life stories of other people. I mean, when others are struggling, I will tell you as a psychologist that there is a really good reason for that. And that, I think many of us only see the external outcomes of other people who are struggling. There's misfortune in their lives, or maybe they have made some air quote mistakes along the way, or something isn't going well for them. And I talk to people all the time about the actual stories behind all of this, and everybody makes perfect sense. And if you had the life experiences that some of these people had, you too would be feeling the same things, making the same decisions. So to have empathy, to have compassion, and to not judge. And it's good for you too. So moving on, another important strategy is to very intentionally learn how to validate yourself. The best way to care less about what other people think is to care more about what you think. Treat your thoughts and your feelings like they matter, because they do. So don't minimize them or tell yourself that you shouldn't feel how you feel. Practice acknowledging, validating, supporting your own feelings and your own thoughts. And again, this can be very hard to do if you don't know how to do it yet. So through journaling, through talking to a great therapist or a coach, through just reminding yourself over and over and over again that whatever you think and feel is actually okay. There's a reason for that. And that you get to decide what is true for you. I'll refer you back to a podcast that I recently updated on how to love yourself. It's really a lot about developing a positive relationship with yourself, and learning how to validate yourself is an important component of that. Another strategy in this work is getting real deliberate around setting healthy boundaries, realizing that other people's thoughts and preferences are just that, and they are their own. And also, if, you have somebody in your life who is highly dependent on external validation and on you doing certain things or being a certain way in order to manage their emotions. When you start doing this work, you're going to see that, and your ability to set healthy boundaries will be strengthened because of that. To be able to say to yourself, and hopefully somebody else, I understand that you would prefer this, and that it would soothe your anxiety if I did. And that is actually not feeling healthy for me. So I'm not going to do that. And I would invite you to find a way to soothe your own anxiety that is independent of me being controlled by whatever, would make you happy. We are much better able to do that with other people when we stop doing it ourselves. So just put that in the hopper. Okay, another strategy, facing the fear of abandonment. For many people, this can be one of the core fears behind being very concerned with what other people think. And it can cause you to abandon yourself in order to maintain relationships that aren't good for you. So finding ways to manage that fear of abandonment and the reality that other people are going to come and go from your life can really help you become more autonomous. You stop hanging on or being as dependent on other people. You're able to release and curate really relationships so that, over time you have a bouquet of really healthy, meaningful, mutually positive relationships with people in your life. Another strategy here is to be limiting who you turn to for validation. If someone routinely invalidates you, criticizes you, stop and consider whether this is someone whose opinion you value in general. Or, do you only care about it when it's a negative assessment of you? Because trying to earn validation from some people, particularly people who are highly critical, who tend to be very self-focused, is not going to work. And so recognizing that you can't get blood from a stone, and some people are much more judgmental and more difficult to please than others is validating of yourself, in the sense of it helps you understand what you're trying to do and develop different expectations of what that person is capable of. So a little rule of thumb: would I take advice from this person? Do I agree with or approve of the way that they're operating their own lives? And so it's awesome to have a small circle of people in your life who really are trustworthy, who are emotionally safe, who can help you think through things when you are genuinely uncertain. I mean, it's nice to have a sounding board of people who are affirming and ideally supportive of any of your decision paths, because it can just help us process things to be able to talk about it out loud. You can also do this through journaling if that's helpful, but be cautious about who you're allowing into that circle. Social media and the culture around it can just by design make you feel a little bit obsessed with how people are responding to you or reacting to you, and just being aware that they're responding to your self-presentation and just noticing the impact that has on you, and making decisions about whether or not that is good for you and the degree to which this experience is adding value to your life, or notice if it's making you wanting to present yourself in different ways in order to get this immediate approval or disapproval from people, and just what it's doing to you. Additionally, working on your self-love and self-esteem. I mean, we talked about this a little bit ago, but when you have a negative inner voice, criticism from others feels like confirmation of something painful that you already believe about yourself. And at the core of having difficulty validating yourself is always this process. And when you have, in contrast, a supportive inner voice, like this loving inner parent, air quote criticism or other people expressing their opinions, it feels like just another data point among a billion others. It's not irrelevant, but it is also not all important because you feel okay about yourself anyway. And again, the beauty here is that when you fundamentally feel okay, and it's not like collapsing into a heap of shame when somebody else gives you feedback about maybe something that does have a growth opportunity for you. When you are able to be calm and generally self-supported, it is much, much easier to take that in a non-reactive and productive way. Like, maybe I am showing up that way sometimes, and maybe I need to consider this and work on it. Thank you for sharing this perspective with me. It's a valuable growth opportunity. And it's just like something that you then take into consideration and maybe start working on, but it's not this catastrophe on the inside. It hasn't made you feel terrible about yourself. And it's also allowed you to strengthen your relationship because you can say to that person, thank you so much for telling me how you feel. I value our relationship and I appreciate your feedback. And I'm going to think about that and maybe work on this because I want to be a good friend for you. We're not being reactive. We're not having big emotional flooding. We're saying, Okay, taking that into consideration. And then, of course, you can do work on that yourself around, does what this person want? Is this in alignment with my own values, with my own boundaries, with my own self-understanding, with who I want to be? And if the answer is yes, then you find a path forward. And if the answer is no, you get to decide the extent to which you're willing to work on yourself in their direction in a way that's congruent with you. And then very lastly, memento mori, y'all, reminding yourself that you're going to die someday, which probably feels very morbid. But when you keep this in mind, right, the big scheme of life, it helps create perspective around how much influence other people are allowed to have in who you are, what you do, and how you operate your life in its whole entirety. Like, what is going to matter to you at the end of your life? There's research that shows that one of the biggest regrets that people on their deathbed have is this feeling that they lived their life by other people's rules and that it limited their own ability to create a life that was really truly meaningful to them, their own values, their own priorities. They didn't do that because they were so focused on what other people thought, working to get their approval rather than their own meaning. And that is a very regrettable place to be. And so just to remember that and even do some thought experiments around, at the very end of my life, what will have mattered to me, and use that as part of that process of getting clear about your own values, what's meaningful to you, can be a really important cornerstone of this work. So I know this is a ton of information. This might be one of the longest podcasts I've ever made. So I'm going to stop talking now. But thank you so much for joining me today to talk about this important topic. Of course, so many more free resources for you on the blog at growingself.com. Please enjoy more LA Witch. You can learn about LA Witch and what they're up to on their Bandcamp page, lawitches.bandcamp.com. And I'll be in touch with you next week. Okay, take care.